Remembering Kent State. In May of 1970, the events that unfolded on the Kent State University campus in Kent, Ohio, began as a protest against the invasion of Cambodia during the Vietnam War. On Saturday, May 2, 1970, more than 1,000 people surrounded the Army ROTC barracks on the Kent State University campus. A few people in the group set fire to the barracks. Firemen tried to stop them, but all attempts were thwarted and the building was destroyed. In order to prevent more destruction, the National Guard tried to clear the campus. On May 4th, the National Guard told protesters that the rally that was supposed to occur that day was canceled. Protesters got even more angry and fought back. Although the protesters were unarmed, the chaos eventually resulted in guardsmen shooting at the protesters.
My friend rang the victory bell, and I went, and we heard that my other dorm friends and good friends were on the other side of the hill, on the other side of the architecture building. So I went running up while my friend was ringing the bell, I went running up the side of the south side of the architecture building's hill. And as I got almost about halfway up, I was along the wall of the building there, and the National Guard came up the other side and crested the hill, and what would have been the rear of this group, basically the whole group started to turn around, but the front looked like the front row that turned around all in unison, and some of them squatted down so the other guys behind them could shoot over their heads, and one of the guys didn't turn around and just trained his gun on me, and I just stood there looking at that guy, and he just stood there looking at me with, though I guess it was, you can't see them with those masks on anyhow. Those gas masks make them look like. Well, anyway, okay, so I could see what was happening. They were shooting at where my friends were supposed to be, and so till that guy took his gun off of me, and then they kind of looked like they were starting to mill around just a bit. So I went running back down onto the commons, yelling, "They're shooting at us!" And anyway, something to that effect. And a couple people grabbed me and shoved me, and somebody punched me in the ear, which ended up bleeding, telling me nobody's shooting anybody. Well, I decided it might be safer to go back up over the hill, so I turned around and ran back up over the hill. And I got to the top of the hill. I had to go right by the guard, and the guard, they were definitely just milling around, and two girls came over by me, and as I was coming up the hill, and said, "We got to get them to get help. You get ambulances, a lot of people hurt." And so they kind of dragged me over with them towards the guard, and the guard said, "Nobody's hurt, nobody's hurt." And then the girl said, "Do you have any dimes? We'll go call ambulance ourselves." And so we frisked my pockets, and I happened to have dimes, I don't know why. So these two girls dragged me into the architecture building, and I just shaking, giving them my dimes, and they're trying to call ambulances. And then we went back out. I went back outside, and we tried to keep people back away from some of the wounded, so not too many people over. We could give them air and kind of forming a ring to hold back. And then we went back down the hill into the commons and sat there, and decided it was time that now we weren't going anywhere, and it was time for them to leave our campus. And we sat there.
Now we had students in front of us and back of us. And that was our mission then, if you will, was to keep that main body, that group that was on the campus, from joining another body that was down on campus. So we acted as the buffer between. It's at this point in time that I very quickly became aware of what was happening on Kent State University campus. I've been on this campus for 4 years with a lot of people. I noted very quickly that the people, as they approached our crowd, were older people, older men and women, a lot of which I'll never see on campus. They brought the crowd to us, small groups, 50, 60, 80, 100 people. They would bring the crowds to us. I know the faces. If I see them today, I'll know their faces. Quickly, they were in front of the crowd. They quickly dispersed, went around behind the crowd, locked hands, this group of 10 or 15 people, and pushed the crowd into us. So what were the leaders dispersed, went behind the group and pushed them into us. This is the point where we got hit by rocks, human feces in plastic bags. We were given the finger, we were yelled at. Things came flying out of the air, and it was weird. I mean, it was dark, but a lot of lights, but things were flying out of the air. We laid some tear gas down. I recall laying some tear gas. One of my friends put some tear gas, shot it across the street into a fraternity house or a rooming house or boarding house. I was down over the hill and I heard the shots going off, and I turned around, and it was a matter of a heartbeat, and the shooting was over. Again, I didn't have my glasses on, I didn't see, but I saw men with the position with the rifles aiming, and some of the men I were with were starting to aim. We didn't know where to shoot or what to shoot or if we should shoot. Very quickly we got the order, ceasefire, ceasefire. I recall the one, it may have been our major, going around with a baton, a nightstick, if you will, hitting the rifle, ceasefire. Oh, he was angry, pushing and shoving, knocking the rifles down, ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. Very quickly that order came to ceasefire. Officer came over, pushed our rifles up in the air, pushed mine up in the air. He said, stop, halt, don't move, stay here, don't move, and pushed our rifles up. Very quickly a line was drawn between those individuals that fired and between the ones of us who were back up on the other side. We then very quickly were given an order to form up in the formation, about face, not look what was going on, and we marched down, which the road is no longer, it's blocked now. But where the one fellow was shot that was laying, there was a road that went down behind campus, if I recall, or someone. We marched down through there.
In your loop.
Yeah, and we were a small group, 30, 40, and we got down around, there was a group of students standing in the road, and I figured, boy, here it comes. And the sergeant said, keep moving, keep marching, do not again move your weapons. We left the Red Sea, they parted. We went through and went back down the bivouac area.
At that point in time, did you know, you knew that that weapons had been discharged, but none of you knew, you were on the other side, could not have seen any of the people
We
shot?
were a little bit lower, I saw them with the weapons shooting. Again, my glasses on, so I couldn't obviously tell they were shooting.
But did you know, or did anyone say at that point that the bullets had an effect? Had that shot anyone? Anyone was laying there?
No, we were moved up very quickly.
So you just knew that there had been a discharge of weapons and that you were moving away from the area. Okay, I think that's important psychologically to know.
Quite truthfully, Sandy, had there not been our own soldiers in front of us, had we been a different group, I can speak for myself, I would have fired. I would have assumed
that you were given an order.
I would assume that when others were firing, they were firing for a reason. I would have fired.
At anything that was there?
Anything that was there, because it was obvious the crowd was advancing. Remember, we advanced, went back. I recall someone throwing and landing beside me if you will, 2x2. There was some construction somewhere on campus going on, I'm not sure where. But there were reinforcement bars being thrown at that point, which is a reinforcement bar you put in concrete. Landed beside me was a 2x2 piece of wood, about 2 feet long perhaps, with nails driven through it. If you will, about 10 nails. That was not something you find laying around. That was made on purpose. Had that hit someone, it would have certainly caused a puncture wound of sort. And it just fell down between several of us, and I sort of stepped over it. And there were all kind of missiles coming out of the air and things. And I remember after the shooting, it got totally quiet. I heard air hissing out of a tire. That sounded, the air hissing, just got quiet. And then there were some screams. And then we were again marched off and down to the side.
On May 4th, 1970, the National Guard marched across the Kent State campus, trying to break up the rally that was initially scheduled that day. The protesters didn't listen, however, and they followed close behind the Guard. Some protesters were as close as 20 yards behind the Guardsmen, but most were located about 60 to 75 yards away. As the Guardsmen approached the crest of Blanket Hill, 28 Guardsmen turned and fired between 61 and 67 shots in 13 seconds. As a result, 13 students were shot. 9 of the 13 students were injured, including one who was permanently paralyzed, and 4 were killed. The 9 students wounded in the attack were Joseph Lewis, John Cleary, Thomas Grace, Alan Canfora, Dean Collar, Douglas Rentmore, James Russell, Robert Stamps, and Donald Mackenzie. Dean Collar was the student who was permanently paralyzed from his injury. The 4 students killed in the attack were Jeffrey Miller, Allison Krauss, William Schroeder, and Sandra Schuer. The May 4th events at Kent State University spurred nationwide protests. Students throughout the United States protested on numerous campuses. Thousands of people marched in Washington, D.C. to protest the violence at Kent State. The Kent State shooting contributed to the growing division between generations in America.